6 months ago, she was the rising star of the U.S. Air Force Academy. Top of her class, perfect scores in aerial simulations, praised by instructors as someone who flew like she was born with wings. Her name was whispered in the halls as the future of American combat aviation. But a single decision, one made from the heart, not the handbook, sent all of that crashing down. During a joint exercise over Nevada airspace, a fellow pilot's oxygen system had failed. The orders were clear: maintain formation and return to base. But Sarah didn't. She broke rank and circled back, risking the mission to guide her teammate down safely. The pilot lived. The mission technically did not. To command, it was insubordination. To Sarah, it was instinct and loyalty. They stripped her from combat tracks and reassigned her to something they called meteorological reconnaissance. In simple terms, weather duty. It was the Air Force equivalent of putting a thoroughbred out to pasture. Every morning at Westfield Air Base, while the other pilots suited up for combat drills or tactical formations, Sarah walked to the far end of the tarmac, alone, to a smaller hangar where her reconnaissance plane waited. Her aircraft was sleek, agile, and entirely unarmed. Its job: to fly, collect data on wind patterns and humidity, and return. She did it 3 times a week. The chatter followed her wherever she went. Not cruel, just quiet enough to sting. Weather duty again. Shame to waste a pilot like that charting clouds. But Sarah never responded. She kept her spine straight, her gaze level. She'd learned early on that silence was often louder than explanation. The base commander, Colonel Jackson, still gave her the same short briefings each time. Standard recon pattern. Altitude 5,000. Stay by the book. His smile was always polite, never warm. What none of them saw, what none of them cared to see, was the storm Sarah carried inside. Not bitterness, not anger, but something deeper: the ache of being misunderstood. She hadn't come this far, endured flight school, earned her wings just to fly loops over air currents and record dew points. Still, she did her job with precision. She inspected her aircraft with the same discipline, as if she were going into battle. She touched the photograph taped inside her locker. Graduation day, her parents beaming beside her, and she reminded herself, you were built for more than this. Just wait. Then came that morning. The sky over Westfield was clear, pale gold with early sunlight. Sarah's flight was routine just like the others. But 7 minutes after takeoff, the radar on her console lit up with 17 signatures. Fast, tight, coordinated. At first, she thought it was a glitch. Birds, maybe. Or static. It wasn't. 17 unmanned combat drones, armed and moving in formation, had appeared from cloud cover, on a direct path to the base she'd just left. No warning. No chatter. No time to react. She was the only one in the air, and no one back at base even knew it yet. What happened next would change everything. Her future, her reputation, even the way command viewed what it meant to be a true combat pilot. But in that moment, suspended 5,000 feet above the Arizona desert in an unarmed aircraft, with death bearing down from the east, Sarah Whittaker made the same kind of decision that had gotten her grounded 6 months earlier. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for backup. She turned her aircraft straight into the storm. Lieutenant Sarah Whittaker had flown far enough from Westfield Air Base that it was now a glint in her rearview display. Below her, the desert spread wide and silent. Above, the heavens were calm, deceptively so. Her instruments had reported nothing unusual. Wind speeds, air pressure, moisture levels, all routine. The only sound in her headset was the familiar hum of static and the occasional call sign echo from ground control. Then her radar blinked, just once. She frowned, adjusted the receiver, thinking it was a brief signal hiccup. Maybe stray interference, or a flock of birds registering oddly. She tapped the side of her console, leaned in closer. The blip had disappeared, until it came back. And this time, it didn't come alone. 1 blip became 3. 3 became 9, then 17. Her screen lit up like a Christmas tree. 17 aircraft, tight formation, approaching fast. They weren't on any scheduled flight path. They weren't responding to identity pings. And worst of all, they were closing in on the base at nearly 600 miles per hour. Sarah's heart didn't race, not yet. Her training wouldn't allow it. But her breathing slowed, her jaw tightened. Control, this is Echo 3. I've got multiple unidentified contacts on radar. 17, moving fast from grid 190. Please confirm. A long pause followed. Then came the voice of Colonel Jackson, tight and sharp. Echo 3 satellites are now picking them up too. Those are unmanned combat drones. We believe they're armed. Current trajectory confirms. They're heading for Westfield. Sarah didn't need confirmation. She could see the pattern forming in real time. These weren't basic recon drones. These were fast, lethal, and they moved with the kind of coordination that no amateur program could muster. Somebody had sent them, and whoever it was had meant for them to arrive undetected until it was too late. And now it was too late. Protocol is clear. Jackson continued. You are not in a combat-ready aircraft. Return to base immediately. She glanced at the empty weapons panel in front of her. It was true, she had nothing. No missiles, no countermeasures, no onboard guns. The reconnaissance jet she flew was designed for speed and agility, not for warfare. It was the gazelle in a valley of wolves, but she also knew the layout of Westfield better than anyone. The combat jets were still in hangars. Pilots in briefing, fuel crews mid-prep. Even if the alert was sounded that instant, it would take at least 10 minutes to scramble fighters. Those drones would be within strike range in 7. She did the math in her head, and the math didn't lie. Control, request immediate base-wide alert. Those drones are less than 10 minutes out. You don't have time. Already initiated, came the tense reply. Nearest combat aircraft en route, ETA 30 minutes. Sarah's hands hovered over her controls. She could still obey orders. Turn around, land. Let someone else try to salvage the disaster from the ground. But deep inside, something told her what she already knew. There was no one else. She was the only one in the sky. The only one with eyes on the threat. The only one with a shot, even if that shot didn't involve firing a single round. Her jaw tightened. She turned the aircraft hard. Control, be advised. I'm altering course to intercept. The voice in her ear shot back fast and angry. Negative, Echo 3. That's a direct violation of command. You are ordered to disengage and return immediately. Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she flipped open a panel on her console that hadn't been touched since she arrived at Westfield. A buried system, experimental electronic warfare suit, never intended for live combat. But Sarah had spent long nights reading every manual, every protocol, just in case. Now was the case. With respect, sir, she said calmly into the radio. If I turn back, you won't have a base left to defend. I can buy you time. There was silence on the line. Then finally, the colonel's voice, a mix of anger, fear, and something close to resignation. God help you, Lieutenant. She pushed the throttle forward, and the jet surged ahead. 17 drones, one unarmed jet, and a pilot no one trusted anymore. It wasn't supposed to be her fight, but sometimes life doesn't wait for permission slips or medals. Sometimes it throws the storm at you, and you either run or fly into it. Sarah chose to fly. Lieutenant Sarah Whittaker had never felt more certain of anything in her life. 17 armed drones, a defenseless base, and a clock ticking toward disaster. Her console warned her again, no offensive systems detected. It might as well have said, you're on your own. Echo 3, return to base immediately. That is a direct order, came Colonel Jackson's voice, firm and final. But Sarah wasn't listening anymore. Not really. Her eyes were locked on the tactical display, watching the red blips march toward Westfield like silent daggers. She thought of the hangars, rows of jets still grounded, of young mechanics fueling them, of flight crews unaware they had mere minutes. She imagined the chaos, the scrambling too late, the flames tearing through a base that had never seen real war until now. There wasn't time for backup. There was only her. And while her plane may not have had missiles, she still had the greatest weapon in the sky, a pilot's instinct. Control, she said quietly into the mic. I'm engaging. Not to fight, to buy you time. Lieutenant. Jackson's voice cracked with disbelief. That is reckless and insubordinate. She flipped a switch. Her plane responded with a hum, stealth mode engaged. Another switch, electronic countermeasures armed, repurposed from their intended use to scramble enemy radar. With respect, sir, she said calmly, I'd rather be court-martialed than write condolence letters for an entire base. Then, she pushed the throttle forward and dove straight into the path of the swarm. What followed was not combat in the traditional sense. It was something else, something between ballot and chess played at max speed. Sarah knew the drone AI systems were advanced. They reacted to threats with precision, but they were programmed to anticipate standard behavior. And she had never flown standard. She banked left, hard, forcing 5 drones to break formation and pursue. Then she cut her engine briefly, letting her aircraft dip like it had stalled. The drones adapted. 2 peeled off to intercept her from below. She reignited the engine mid-dive, rolled into a full inverted arc, and rocketed upward at an angle the drones couldn't replicate. 2 slammed into each other trying to follow. The sky lit briefly with their demise. Control, she reported, breath steady but tight. I've diverted part of the formation. Status on base defense. Surface to air batteries coming online, someone responded. But they can't fire until the drones break formation. Too close together. Risk of miss or collateral damage is high. Then I'll split them, she replied. It wasn't about destroying the drones. She knew that was beyond her. It was about confusion. Delay. Creating just enough chaos that Westfield had a chance. And she was doing it, one impossible maneuver at a time. Back in the control room, silence had settled like fog. The screen showed 1 blue dot dancing among 17 red ones. It defied logic. It defied physics. And yet, it held. Colonel Jackson gripped the edge of the display. Who trained her? A junior officer replied without looking up. Top of her class. But reprimanded 6 months ago for disobeying orders during a live drill. She saved another pilot, but broke protocol. Jackson exhaled slowly. So we punished her for being exactly the kind of pilot we need right now. In the skies, Sarah felt the G-forces crush against her as she flipped her aircraft into a tight corkscrew, drawing 3 more drones away from the pack. Her plane screamed in protest, overstressed, underfueled, not built for this kind of flying. But she knew its limits, knew her own. 1 misstep and she'd be a memory, a footnote. But if she stayed perfect for just 5 more minutes, she could hold the line. Control? She said again. I've got 6 drones chasing me. Remaining 11 are adjusting course, but I'm keeping them scattered. Lieutenant, this is General Reynolds, came a new voice. You've already done more than anyone expected. I'm ordering you to disengage. She closed her eyes for a moment. Another order. Sir, she said with quiet conviction. If I leave now, the base falls. But if I stay just a little longer, we win. There was a long pause. Then Reynolds spoke again softly. Good speed? Lieutenant. In that moment, Sarah wasn't the disgraced pilot from 6 months ago. She wasn't the woman buried in weather duty. She was the line between survival and destruction, and in the pale morning light, with a swarm of steel death chasing her shadow, she flew like she had nothing left to prove, only something left to protect. All Lieutenant Sarah Whittaker had was a reconnaissance aircraft, a gut full of determination, and the kind of flying instincts that couldn't be taught in any classroom. The drones were fast, sleek, cold. They moved in calculated swarms, guided by code, not conscience. But Sarah had something they didn't fear, and the discipline to fly through it. Her first maneuver was one they'd never expect. She cut her engines. Her aircraft dipped like a wounded bird, fluttering downward in a stall pattern that sent 2 of the drones surging ahead to intercept. But at the last possible second, she kicked the engines back on, rolled left, and shot upward, nearly vertical, slicing the gap between the 2 drones. Their automated systems couldn't adjust in time. One clipped the other. Both spiraled off course, systems confused by their own proximity. Control, I've broken 2 from formation, she called out. Feeding them your way. Back at Westfield, the base's anti-air systems were now fully online, but they still couldn't risk firing into a tight drone cluster. If Sarah could separate them, even briefly, they'd have a shot, and she was just getting started. She pulled hard to the right and climbed into a dense patch of cloud. One she had logged just minutes earlier during her weather survey. To a casual observer, it was just a mist bank. But Sarah knew better. Inside, the cloud carried heavy moisture and enough static to distort most sensor arrays. It was the kind of turbulence drone AI didn't like. Too unpredictable. 3 followed her in. Bad move. She flipped her transponder off and changed altitude in a heartbeat, moving through the murk like a whisper. The drones, now blind to her exact location, started circling, confused by the sudden signal loss. Control, she whispered, breath fogging in the cold cockpit. 3 drones disoriented in grid Charlie 2. They've lost track of me. Recommend defensive fire. The response came fast. The ground units locked on, and in seconds, flashes lit up the cloud bank. Debris rained down. She didn't need confirmation. She heard it. 6 down, 11 to go. Sarah's plane jolted as she re-entered open sky. G-forces pressed into her chest as she dove to pick up speed, forcing the remaining drones to react. They tried to regroup. She didn't let them. She flew low, skimming the desert floor, using the terrain to mask her movements. The drones, chasing at different altitudes, struggled to follow. One misread a canyon ridge and burst into flame. Another tried to climb above her but caught a crosswind she had already accounted for. It spun out, spiraling like a leaf in a storm. "That's 8, she muttered. "Lieutenant," came General Reynolds's voice through the comms. "What exactly are you doing up there?" "Sir, I'm flying weather patterns," she answered with a hint of dry humor. "Just like the job description says." He didn't respond, but someone chuckled in the background. Inside the control room, eyes were glued to the tactical display. Colonel Jackson leaned in, watching that single blue dot twist and dodge between the angry red storm. "How is she even doing this?" one tech muttered. A junior officer brought up her file again. She scored perfect on advanced combat simulation. But her real strength was always environmental tactics. She studied microclimates, pressure bursts, turbulence patterns. "Wait," said another. "Are you telling me she's using weather as a weapon?" The colonel didn't blink. "No, she's using it as a shield." In the sky, Sarah's cockpit alarms blared. Her fuel was dipping fast, under 40%. She knew she had minutes, not hours. But the remaining drones were now scattered, reacting to her unpredictability. Their formation had broken. Their behavior was erratic. That's when she made her boldest move yet. She climbed hard, higher than her aircraft was rated for. The sky grew darker. The controls grew sluggish. The thin air pushed the jet to its limits. The drones followed. She didn't let them get close. She waited, baited them, until they were all within one radar sector. Then she dove. Her plane plummeted like a dropped hammer, slicing through a narrow corridor of air she had measured before the mission even began. The drones tried to follow, but couldn't match her dive speed or trajectory. 3 overshot the corridor and collided. Another drifted too low and was picked off by ground fire. Now just 7 remained. Sarah leveled off at a brutal angle, her entire airframe shuddering, but she was still flying. "Control," she said between breaths. "If you've got missiles ready, now's the time." 2 drones in range. Came the response. Firing. From the ground, anti-air turrets roared. 2 more drones vanished in flashes of fire and smoke. "Confirmed hits," said a controller. "Lieutenant, that brings us to 5. "Copy that," she replied, glancing at the dwindling fuel. Still breathing. 5 drones. 1 pilot. And a base that still stood because she'd refused to run. No weapons, no backup. Just skill, guts, and a deep, practiced knowledge of how the sky moved. And Sarah Whittaker had turned it all into a weapon. The blue dot, the lone unarmed jet, was flying like nothing anyone on the ground had ever seen. Barrel rolls at impossible speeds, coordinated cloud dives, low-altitude evasive patterns. It was beyond textbook. Beyond protocol, it was something else entirely. General Howard Reynolds leaned in closer to the tactical display, watching in stunned silence as Lieutenant Sarah Whittaker executed a maneuver that caused 3 drones to collide mid-air. "Who the hell is this pilot?" he asked, not looking away from the screen. Colonel Jackson swallowed hard, then gestured to a junior officer at the terminal. "Pull up her file." The personnel screen blinked to life, showing a clean, cut academy portrait. Sarah Elizabeth Whittaker, born in Nebraska, top marks in aerial simulations, decorated at graduation, reassigned to reconnaissance after a disciplinary citation. Reynolds narrowed his eyes. What was the citation? The officer hesitated. Disobeyed a direct order during a joint training exercise. Another pilot's system failed mid-flight. She broke formation and guided him down safely. And for that, she got grounded. Colonel Jackson stiffened. It was a violation of flight command structure, sir. The entire exercise was compromised. Reynolds leaned in further. Compromised or saved? Another voice chimed in, this one from the back of the room. It was Colonel Danvers, recently reassigned from Defense Advanced Projects. He walked forward, slow and deliberate, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Sir," he said quietly, "what maneuver did she just execute?" The technician blinked. Sigma 9. The room fell silent. Completely silent. Reynolds turned slowly. "Sigma 9, he repeated. "That's not taught. That's classified." Danvers nodded. "Exactly. Then how the hell does a recon pilot on weather duty know it?" Danvers said nothing. Instead, he reached for a secure tablet, entered a long passcode, and pulled up a separate personnel file. This one red bordered and stamped with a large black eagle. Project Nighthawk. Reynolds scanned it in silence. His brows slowly lifted. She was a primary candidate. The primary, Danvers confirmed. Back when the program was still active. Reynolds shook his head. That program was shut down 2 years ago. Restructured. Danvers corrected. After the funding cuts, most of the candidates were reassigned. Whitaker was one of the few not placed in combat rotation. Why? Danvers hesitated. Because of Blackwater. Reynolds looked up sharply. The incident in Nevada. Yes. She used an untested maneuver to protect another pilot. Command at the time labeled it as a rogue act, too unpredictable. But the truth is, that flight path matched 93% of Sigma 9's projected envelope. She didn't just guess. She knew what she was doing. Back in the skies, Sarah was pushing her aircraft to the brink. She wasn't just flying anymore. She was orchestrating chaos. Every banked turn, every dive into cloud cover, every climb to the edge of the atmosphere, it all had purpose. She was executing Phase 2 of Sigma 9. The drones, programmed to predict human behavior, were now tangled in a web of misdirection and sensor confusion. "Control?" she said over comms, her voice calm despite the sweat dripping down her back. "Initiating electromagnetic disruption field." "Lieutenant, repeat that." "Did you say electromagnetic?" "Yes, sir," she confirmed. "Reconfiguring recon systems to broadcast on drone control frequencies." 20 seconds to burn. Reynolds stared at the screen. "She's converting that aircraft into an EW platform. That's impossible. That model isn't designed to handle." Danvers interrupted. "It is. But it was never meant to be revealed unless absolutely necessary. Sigma 9 was always a last resort protocol. And now she's using it," Reynolds said softly. "Without permission, without backup." He turned to Jackson. "You grounded her for disobedience. But in truth, she was never meant to follow the rules. That's what Nighthawk was built for. Pilots who could make the impossible call when no one else would." Back in the sky, Sarah hit 56,000 feet, well above the aircraft's rated ceiling. Her engine screamed, lights flashed, but she was still in control. 15 seconds, she said. "Power rerouted. EMP charge stable." "Lieutenant Whitaker." Reynolds broke in over the comm line, his voice low and direct. "This is General Reynolds. I am authorizing immediate deployment of Sigma 9 countermeasures. Godspeed, Nighthawk." There was a pause, and then Sarah's quiet reply. "Copy that, sir." She pulled the nose upward one final time, then killed the engine. For a heartbeat, her jet floated, suspended in silence above the clouds, 9 drones closing in. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she inverted the aircraft and dumped every remaining watt of power into the EW suite. A pulse of blue light shimmered across the sky, unseen to the naked eye but lethal to enemy systems. The drones shuddered, wobbled. One by one, their red signals vanished from the tactical screen, spiraling toward the earth like metal snowflakes. Sarah Whitaker had pulled off the impossible, and now everyone knew why. Lieutenant Sarah Whitaker was flying on fumes, literally. Her fuel gauge blinked in the red. Warning lights were firing across her console like a Christmas tree in crisis. Altitude 58,000 feet and climbing. Air pressure thinning. Engine strain nearing catastrophic, but below her, 5 drones still circled the base. And she still had one card left to play. The electromagnetic pulse wasn't designed for this kind of aircraft. On paper, it was theoretical, buried in black budget programs. Sigma 9 had been classified for a reason. It was as much a gamble as a tactic. Use the wrong timing, miscalculate the waveform, and you could fry your own systems before it ever reached the enemy. Sarah knew the risk, but she also knew the math. If she did nothing, those 5 drones would descend in under 3 minutes. Westfield would burn. Men and women she worked with, Trained beside, saluted each morning, gone. She couldn't let that happen. Control, she said, voice strained but steady. I'm initiating final phase of Sigma 9. Rerouting all remaining power to recon suite. Charging for full EMP broadcast. Lieutenant. General Reynolds came through the line again, this time without the bark of command. Just concern. You won't have enough power left to stabilize. You may not pull out of the dive. Copy that, sir, she replied. But we'll only need one pilot in the sky if this works. And right now I'm it. Inside the control room, you could have heard a pin drop. Every technician, officer, and radar analyst was frozen, watching the little blue dot rise beyond the aircraft's safe ceiling. It shouldn't have been possible, but she made it possible. Then came the call. EMP pulse in 543. Sarah cut all power. The aircraft jerked violently. Systems flickered. Lights dimmed to black. She was flying blind, the only illumination coming from the fading sun above her canopy and the final countdown in her head. 2-1. With a flick of her wrist, she triggered the release. A surge of electromagnetic energy exploded outward, invisible but devastating. For a split second, the sky held its breath. Then the drones began to fall. At Westfield, the radar lit up in confusion. 5 red markers blinking erratically, losing formation, spinning in place, then vanishing from the screen one by one. Cheers erupted, but not from everyone. Where's her signal? Someone shouted. Sarah's jet had gone dark, her systems fried in the blast. No radio, no navigation, no power, just a thin shell of aluminum and glass spiraling through the upper atmosphere. In the cockpit, Sarah fought to breathe. Her oxygen was thinning. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from raw, physical overload. The jet rattled violently, caught in a death dive toward the Earth. She reached for the reset panel. Nothing. Tried the emergency battery. Still dead. Then, at 20,000 feet, something flickered. One system, then two. She slammed her hand against the panel. Sparks danced across the console. Avionics buzzed back to life, stuttering like a breathless runner trying to stand. She pulled on the stick hard. The nose came up, slow, sluggish, but climbing. Control, she croaked. Systems rebooting, request emergency landing clearance. Back on the ground, Reynolds leaned forward, eyes wide. Her signal had returned, barely. But it was her. She's alive, he whispered. Then louder, get those fire crews on the runway. She's coming in heavy and hot. Sarah could see the base now, just a shimmer of silver against the desert floor. Her windshield was cracked. One engine had gone completely. The other was coughing like an old truck in winter. But she had one last job. Land. She adjusted the flaps manually. Her hands felt like lead. Her arms shook from exhaustion. The controls responded like a wounded animal, jerky, unreliable. Still, she lined up the approach. This is Echo 3, she said softly into a barely working mic. Beginning final approach. She cleared the runway threshold. Wheels down, flaps deployed. The landing was rough. The jet bounced once, then twice, sparks flying from beneath. The rear stabilizer gave out. Metal screeched. One tire exploded on impact, but she held the line. The aircraft slid to a halt 200 yards from the control tower. Silence. Then the cockpit canopy opened slowly, and Sarah Whittaker, sweating, shaking, suit covered, lifted her helmet and stood up in the fading light of the desert sun. All around her, emergency crews rushed in. But it wasn't them she noticed first. It was the people. Pilots, engineers, radar techs, maintenance crews, all standing still, watching. Then, one by one, they began to applaud. General Reynolds stepped forward, removed his hat, and saluted. 17 drones. 0 casualties. And one hell of a pilot, he said. Sarah didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just nodded. Because she had done what no one expected of her. Not as a woman, not as a pilot, not as a recon officer. She had done what a Nighthawk was born to do. She flew into the storm, and she made it out. For 6 months, Lieutenant Sarah Whittaker had flown weather duty, believing she was being punished. Grounded from combat, sidelined from the fight, banished to the margins of the mission. She had followed orders. She had done the work, charting cloud formations, wind drift, thermal pockets. She knew every microclimate from Westfield to the edge of the southern ridge. She could read the sky like a surgeon reads a heartbeat. And yet, every time she walked across the tarmac, in that pale blue reconnaissance jumpsuit, she'd felt the stares. There goes the one who broke formation. She used to be promising. No, she checks barometric pressure. She'd carried that weight in silence. Until the sky broke open, and the base she loved was minutes from destruction. Until she was the only one airborne. Until 17 drones came for everything she thought she'd lost. And now, the truth had come to light. It was the next morning when General Reynolds called her into the secure briefing room. This time, the seat at the head of the table wasn't empty. She sat down wearing her new insignia. Nighthawk, dark and clean on her shoulder. But more than that, she wore a different expression. Not pride, not relief, clarity. Across the room, Colonel Danvers activated the wall display. A series of classified documents flashed across the screen. Personnel evaluations, mission reports, long-forgotten memos stamped confidential. Lieutenant, the general began. You thought weather duty was a sentence. But it was a question. Sarah tilted her head slightly, waiting. We've had pilots disobey orders before, he continued. Some with good intentions, some reckless. What separated you was that you weren't wrong. You made the hard call, and you did it for someone else. Colonel Danvers stepped in. So we gave you clouds. We gave you silence. We gave you the absence of direction, to see what you'd do without it. Reynolds nodded. That's what Nighthawk was always about. Not pilots who follow perfectly. Pilots who know when not to. Sarah sat still, processing. It wasn't exile. It wasn't punishment. It was preparation. She thought back to those lonely flights, miles above the desert, tracing jet streams, logging crosswinds, noting the subtle shift in thermal layers over time. At the time, it felt like busy work. But during the drone incursion, it had all returned like muscle memory. She'd known the cloud banks that would disrupt their sensors. She'd known the terrain that would scatter their targeting. She'd known how to fly around the rules, because she'd studied the air itself. And no one had seen it coming, because that was the test. After the briefing, she stepped outside into the warm morning light. Falcons circled lazily overhead. Ground crews moved with renewed energy. The old whispers were gone now. In their place were nods, salutes. A quiet respect that didn't need to be spoken. Captain Blake walked up, holding 2 coffee mugs. He offered one to her without a word. She accepted it, raising an eyebrow. No briefing today, she asked. Not for you, he replied. You write them now. They sat together on a bench near Hangar 6, watching a group of new pilots jogging across the field in training formation. They don't know yet, she said softly, what the sky can really do to you. How quiet it gets when you're the only one up there. They will, Blake replied. You'll show them. That afternoon, she returned to the hangar where her damaged aircraft had been towed. It was scarred, dented, missing panels, but it had flown like a warrior. She reached out and placed her hand gently on the nose cone, feeling the warmth of sun, baked metal beneath her palm. A mechanic nearby watched her with a half smile. Never seen a recon bird do what that one did yesterday? He said. You made that thing sing? She nodded. She was never just recon, Sarah replied. She was waiting, just like her. By sunset, Sarah stood in front of the new Nighthawk squadron, 8 pilots, each with a reputation for being difficult, unorthodox, or too bold. She saw the same look in their eyes she used to carry: doubt, frustration, hunger. She smiled. You weren't chosen because you were perfect, she said. You were chosen because you're possible. She paused. And if you ever wonder why the sky seems too quiet, too routine, maybe it's because someone wants to see what you'll do when no one's watching. For Sarah Whittaker, the greatest truth hadn't come at 58,000 feet. It had come in the quiet that followed. Sometimes the rules keep you safe, and sometimes they keep you from saving others. She hadn't been grounded. She'd been taught to fly free. Sometimes in life, we're placed in quiet corners, not because we've failed, but because someone somewhere is watching to see what we'll do when no one else is looking. Sarah Whittaker thought she'd been forgotten. After disobeying orders to save a fellow pilot, she was taken off combat duty and assigned to weather reconnaissance, a job many saw as meaningless. Day after day, she flew alone through the sky, logging winds and clouds while others trained for glory. But when the day came, when 17 enemy drones appeared and the entire base was minutes from destruction, she was the only one in the air. She had no weapons, no backup, just her instincts and everything she had quietly learned during those pointless weather runs. She didn't run, she rose. And in doing so, she saved hundreds of lives and proved that disciplined heart and courage never go out of style. So here's the lesson. If you feel sidelined, overlooked, stuck in a season of silence, don't give up. You might not be being punished. You might be getting ready for the moment you were born for. Sometimes the mission isn't obvious until the storm comes. But when it does, everything you thought was wasted will be what saves the day. Has there ever been a time in your life when you thought you were being left behind, but later realized it was preparing you for something greater? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might be encouraged by it. And if stories like this move you, tales of quiet strength, second chances, and unexpected heroes, hit that subscribe button and join our growing family, because some of the most powerful stories are the ones almost no one saw coming.